Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ARM Exchange webinar. We're going to wait just another minute to give everyone a chance to connect, and then we'll get started. Thanks for joining us today. Why don't we get started? My name is Annette Vickers. I'm the Senior Strategy and Market Analyst here at ARM Institute. Our topic today for our webinar is using augmented and virtual reality for robotics training and assessment. Thank you all for joining us today. Just a little housekeeping. Everyone will stay on mute. And please, if you have any questions, just go to the Q&A section of the Zoom call, and you can submit your questions there, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end of the webinar. For most of you that are familiar with us, you are familiar with ARM, you might be familiar with our webinar series, but we do offer these webinars once a month. We took a little bit of a pause last quarter, but we're starting back up again in 2023. And our purpose is really to share trends and insights and expertise in the advanced manufacturing world, Industry 4.0, and our emphasis is on robotics, AI, and workforce development. Typically, the format for these webinars is a panel discussion where we have our ARM consortium members and our ARM staff having a discussion about any popular industry trends. Our ARM consortium members also can participate in exclusive webinars just for members, and also to make a note that a late project that was completed with SIMINSIGHTS and ARM Institute on AR/VR, and that please make sure that you with ARM Institute. We are a national DoD-funded institute. We have over 375 members. We're looking to accelerate our mission here at ARM Institute is to accelerate the development and adoption of innovative robotics technology, pretty much through our diverse ecosystem of partners across academia, industry, and government. As you can see, this is here's the three fronts that we pursue our mission. We have a robust ecosystem made up of, as I mentioned, over 375 members. And we do multiple project calls in the area of technology development. And we also have education and workforce development projects with our roboticscareer.org site. If you have not visited that site, please take an opportunity to visit that site. That's a platform that we've developed that identifies all institutions across the United States that you can receive robotics training or education. And keep your eye open on that because we have some developments coming where we will be doing job matching capability as well. So moving forward with our seminar, our webinar for today, we have a full panelist. We have Corey Adams, the Education Program Manager from Universal Robots. Corey is based in Columbus, Ohio, and he has nearly 10 years in industrial automation industry experience. He has worked in business development with Universal Robots for 2 years and now specializes in education as the Educational Program Manager. So welcome, Corey. Next, we have Raj Jha, and Raj is the CEO of SIMINSIGHTS. SIMINSIGHTS is a California-based company focused on applying XR and AI technologies for upskilling, reskilling, and credentialing. And he holds a BS in mechanical engineering from IIT and a MS in mechanical engineering from Ohio State, and also an MBA from UCLA. So welcome aboard, Raj. Next, we have Jim LORENTZ. He's the president of AVR Connect. AVR Connect is an XR solutions provider for the growing number of 3D AR, VR platforms being used for learning, content sharing, and 3D visualization and configuration. And last but not least, we have Dan SLOAN, who is the Strategic Partnerships Director at SME. And Dan has worked for SME for a number of years. He's had over 30 years experience forging strategic relationships between private industry, academia, technology, and service providers for solving manufacturers' most challenging workforce development requirements. So welcome aboard, Dan. So next, I will turn it over to Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen is ARM Institute Certification Manager, and Mary Ellen joined us last year. In this role, Mary Ellen is responsible for the ARM endorsement program, which seeks to identify, evaluate, and support quality robotics and manufacturing training programs, and connect employers with resources to grow and upskill their workforce. Mary Ellen holds a master's degree in business administration from the University of Pittsburgh and a Bachelor of Science degree from the Pennsylvania State University. So now I will turn it over to Mary Ellen, who will begin the discussion with the panel.
Thank you, Annette. Raj, I'd like to direct the first question to you. As Annette mentioned, over the past year, the SIMINSIGHTS team has developed a virtual reality-based robotics skills assessment prototype. And I was hoping that you could give us a brief description of that proof of concept.
Yes, thank you, Mary Ellen. So I'll first describe the problem statement that we set out to address, then the solution that we developed with ARM and other partners, and then talk about the results that we obtained. So the problem that we set out to address was that in manufacturing, there are a number of incumbent workers who have skills in automation and robotics, but they don't have any credentials to signal to employers that they have those skills. Now, there are traditional ways of assessing these skills that could potentially work, but they have a number of issues. They require traveling to a site that has the robotic equipment. They also require an expert who's going to conduct the assessment and give the scores, and they involve safety risks with the pandemic or with the heavy machinery and so on. So because of these limitations, these traditional ways of assessment basically are inefficient, expensive, and unsafe to the point where they are just impractical from the point of view of scaling up to keep up with the massive skills gap that exists. To solve this problem, we worked with the ARM team to essentially digitalize the assessment while keeping it as much like the real world as possible, using virtual reality and artificial intelligence technologies. So we basically took an actual robotic work cell with all the equipment and all the processes, and we converted into a high fidelity simulation. Now, when you put on a VR headset, you find yourself at that virtual robotic work cell, where everything looks and behaves like the real thing. And then you're asked to troubleshoot what's wrong with the robot, and you have all the same tools that you would in the real world. And we even use AI technologies to implement some virtual humans that can role play with you, so they can try to help you answer questions as needed. And we did all of this using a software platform called Hyperskill. Hyperskill is a no-code platform for creation, delivery, and analytics of VR/AR simulations for upskilling and reskilling. Now, for the results, we started out with subject matter experts in our team. We conducted usability studies along the way. And toward the end, we conducted expert novice studies, which is pretty standard in this field, to validate the assessment. And we got great feedback. We made sure that novices cannot get through and complete the assessment, and experts can. Since then, we have demonstrated it in Pittsburgh, Washington, DC, and Tampa, and received great positive feedback. At this point, we have the proof of concept completed. We have shown that it's possible to use these technologies for high quality assessment, and we are ready to scale this up to more users or add more tasks and assessments.
Great, thank you, Raj. Jim, I was hoping that you could provide a brief description about a project that AVR Connect has developed using AR/VR technology for training purposes in the manufacturing industry.
Yeah, thank you, Mary Ellen. Thanks for having me here today. Yeah, I want to share a little bit about an augmented reality program that we implemented with an automotive parts manufacturer who had the goal to improve processes around machine maintenance and inspection and upkeep. And their existing program and the process they were using was paper and pen. Send somebody out, a tech out in the morning with a clipboard for the tasks, check them, make notes. That's about it. So the goals of the program right from the start were improving safety, as always, reducing time to perform the task, and had a consistent, accurate process across the employees, easy access for tracking, preventative maintenance, the tools. That was the other goal, the tools they can have in their hands before they went out there. Ensure the tasks were completed in the correct order and scheduled time to document the process, including be able to share images and notes. And so we built all of this in an application. It was AR based, so we had included the AR models, the digital twins, instructional content overlay.
Hey, Dan Holmes, how are you doing?
And the content was originally launched from an iPad and then later mixed reality headset. So in the end, the techs access the app and they're able to view the machine that they were scheduled to work on, that specific machine, the assigned dates that were there. The app would ID the machine, for example, a gear pump, and the specific parts that needed to be checked off. Progress and completion of each task was tracked. We used AR object recognition, where we're able to attach 3D objects and digital overlays to the specific part of the actual machine. We added 3D wayfinder arrows and overlays, guides for the tech, so they can, in each step of the appropriate manner, most efficient order possible, so they wouldn't have to backtrack or repeat. We had toolbars that were built in there for access to reference images or videos if they needed more. So in addition to the maintenance, the training, the techs had check the completion box for each individual tasks, and everything at the end was followed with a section to add needed maintenance or notes. So in the end, the program was extremely successful, and it was launched onto different machines as it was starting to reach the goals pretty quickly of certainly of safety and speed and accuracy for maintenance around these upkeeps of the machines.
Mary Ellen, I believe you're muted.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. Are we good?
We
Okay,
got you back.
excellent. Dan, can you provide an example or a couple of examples of where you found this kind of technology to be most useful?
Yeah, absolutely. Mary Ellen, thank you. And thank you for having me. And thank you everyone for joining in your time today. I think the best way to understand how SME uses VR technology is to understand it in the context of the e-learning catalog that our workforce development unit, Tooling USME, brings out to schools and out to employers and to our partners. And so, as some of you may be aware, right, Tooling USME has pioneered now for 20 years of the use of what's called hybrid learning and e-learning as part of technical training for the manufacturing community. And there are some advantages to using the e-learning in that the curriculum can be, bucketed and commodified in such a way that flexible, nimble learning pathways can support not a lot of these legacy technologies, but a lot of these emerging technologies like robotics. And so what does that mean? It means that with e-learning classes and controls and robotics and sensors and math and quality safety and so on and so forth, the e-learning has been designed in such a way to support these kinds of curricula. And what we've done with VR technology is really bolster this hybrid learning approach. And so for those schools that say want to flip the classroom and provide a bit of self-paced learning to students, maybe in their own time to access the curriculum, what we've done with our VR programming is to couple that assessment piece with a lot of the learning outcomes that are tied to our curricula. And what you get in result is a much more engaging experience. When flipping the classroom, it actually supports a methodology that we call learn, practice, perform. So as an instructor in a classroom or a training manager at a facility that say rolls out 20, 30-minute modules in various topics, the VR labs can then measure the transfer of knowledge that is happening in the learn stage of that learn, practice, perform. It enables the student and the adult learner to be able to practice a lot of what they're learning in a live, simulated, safe 3D world environment. And then, of course, tracking back to the system, kind of those metrics around what are these students gaining, what are these students, failing to pick up, and really enabling the instructor and the folks to provide a little bit more targeted and accurate coaching and reconciliation, and ultimately leading to performing out on the floor or performing in a applied learning environment like a training lab. And so hopefully by looking at it sort of in the context of the learn, practice, perform methodology and how the VR provides that assessment vehicle in that live 3D world environment, we're able to really bolster what is already a very valuable component of our learning strategy, and that's the role of hybrid learning. So hopefully that provides what you're looking for. Thank you, Mary Ellen.
Very helpful. Thank you, Dan.
Yep.
Corey, I was wondering if you would mind telling us any lessons learned that you've come across either through your own organization's use of AR, VR, or things you've seen in working with customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the invite, Mary. I'm super excited to be here. I think when we look at AR, VR, I think the biggest lesson learned is that the style of training a student can do. I think that that's really important. AR, VR is a great tool to begin to understand the process and procedures when looking at it as a solutions impact. I think, Raj and Dan both kind of touched on it. When we look at the incumbent worker who have years and years of experience of on-the-job training, but don't really have a good solution to take that on-the-job knowledge and put that to a certification or to a competency to look at automation. And I think AR, VR is a unique way to to really highlight some key areas that we want to learn in a safe environment, in a more cost-effective environment, then we might see, removing an individual from the manufacturing floor or putting them in front of, industrial graded equipment and asking them to make a mistake or us creating a mistake. I think we can control a lot of that through AR, VR, and I think the interest there is only growing, and the likelihood of different trainings we have there's also growing at a pretty astonishing rate.
Okay, I'm going to open up to the whole group this next question. I'm curious as to if you've got, in your experience, could you give some examples of when you've seen AR being used to train more effectively than VR? Is that something that you come across frequently? Do you have any strong preferences given worker experience or anything along those lines in terms of using AR versus VR?
I can go first, Mary Ellen. We work with customers not only in manufacturing, but also healthcare and education. And as far back as 2018, we were running randomized control trials to compare both VR-based training and AR-based training against traditional training with actual equipment. And so looking at all of the data points accumulated over the last 5 years or so, I don't believe that AR is better than VR, especially if you consider the fact that the cost of the AR devices, so I assume that we're talking about the HoloLens or Magic Leap, which are quite a bit more expensive than a smartphone or a tablet. And also with AR, you were required to have the real tools and be in a real facility, whereas with VR, you can simulate a much bigger variety of situations. For example, working on the moon or on Mars, or working inside a nuclear reactor, and without exposing yourself to the risks of the environment. So when I look at all the factors, and there's just no evidence that AR is across the board better than VR. And when I zoom in on specific studies, I've seen studies where AR was worse than VR, and I've also seen one where it was better. So in general, there's no, I don't agree that one is better than the other. It just comes down to the specific use case. What are your learning objectives or assessment objectives? What kinds of skills are being targeted? What is the budget? What is the situation with respect to access to facility? How noisy is it? How safe is it? So considering all of that, we all often make recommendations to our customer about which hardware would make more sense for them.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that? All right. Well, I'll move along. Considering the next 5 years, what kind of growth trajectory do you see occurring in the use of AR, VR among small, medium, and large manufacturers?
Hey, Mary Ellen, this is Corey. I'd like to take that one or provide a little bit of thoughts on that one. I think when you look at the next 5 years with AR, VR, I think you're going to see large manufacturers start to adopt that technology a little bit quicker than the small to medium size. That's just because of the trends that we see within SMEs and the adoption of new technology. But I think that they're going to catch up, and I think this is a very useful tool that small to medium sized manufacturers will start to grasp towards as that generation starts to retire and get a little bit younger as well. But I really think the next 5 years for AR, VR is really going to kind of expand into multiple different segments, being segment specialized, whether that's maybe in specific to machine tending or maybe specific to welding, rather than just maybe the competency. So I really think that it's really going to kind of explode in the way that we can do digital learning.
Yeah, and if I could, Mary Ellen, maybe provide a little bit of a couple to that, and that is, certainly in the schools, we're seeing a lot of excitement from the youth, whether that's in secondary or even post-secondary education, where you're talking about generations who are a little more nimble or accustomed to some of the tools like the Oculus VR headset, which is what Tooling SME uses as part of our labs. And when we're bringing these out to our student summits and to IMTS and our Smart Expo with ARM like this past summer, there's just a lot of excitement and energy, just, as we see these students see that they can learn new techniques, new technologies, and kind of get past a lot of that blind side that a lot of folks have about careers in manufacturing. Our role at SME, certainly we prioritize sort of top of the funnel strategies and working with our partners like the schools out in our communities. And so, to answer the question of what kind of growth do we see, I think that we've uncovered something very exciting and compelling and meaningful here. And that is not only do the technologies evolve and become smarter and more data-driven and more automated, obviously in the case of robotics, but the education systems and the curriculum are evolving as well. And in this specific, to your example, to your question, they're able to take advantage of a lot of these technologies and help support a lot of the attract piece, which is so important, right? You can't train people until you attract them in the case of the pipeline. So very excited to see growth year over year here over the next 5 years.
And I'll add to that, if I may. We are seeing continued growth in really all industries, industry, education, related projects from aftermarket parts or sales teams using all of XR, a lot of 3D configuration and visualization tools to get a better view. At the end of the day, AR application site for viewing, whether it be in an AR or even a 3D player. So more and more of the smaller and mid-sized organizations are reaching out to us, even looking for help. They started a project, they're looking to complete it or expand on it. And another direction we're seeing from there, after kind of a step two, and after they put their toe in the water, is really helping to arm them. They're looking to arm them with custom models, custom assets that will be specific to their industry, to their people over there. So definitely from 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 6 months, lots reaching out for bite-sized learning to enhance existing programs, add engagement and discussion.
Thank you. You've touched on the element of youth and the fact that the workforce is getting younger, and that seems to be something that could be a major driving force in the adoption of AR, VR. Wondering if you could mention a couple of other factors that you see that are contributing to driving the adoption of this technology.
Hey, Mary Ellen, this is Corey again. I think, Jim kind of mentioned it, the adoption of this type of technology into the school system. I think that, the generation that's coming into the workforce, they're used to the technology, they're used to smartphones. But I think the one interesting thing that generation is doing is they see how technology can make them more efficient. And I think that this is one of those ways that they're really leaning into. And as that next generation gets into the workforce, they're going to look at how this technology can help them and their team become more efficient down the line as well.
And if I can add here, the core economic value proposition is definitely there. The return on investment, the time to value, it's very compelling, as the other panelists have also mentioned. So that's really going to be a huge driver. In addition to the fact that you have the younger demographic, they are comfortable with technologies, but they also need a lot of guidance. They have a lot of rapid learning to do in order to be a contributor in manufacturing.
Okay, thank you all for that. So I think we can all agree that the challenges to adoption of AR, VR are quite different for small and medium manufacturers versus larger ones. how would you advise, and you've already mentioned, guidance that you've given previously to manufacturing organizations, but could you just hit a couple of highlights, ways that you'd advise a small, medium-sized enterprise to begin incorporating VR, AR in their efforts to hire and upskill the workforce, the robotics workforce?
If I could, Mary Ellen, and I've had the pleasure of meeting the panelists and know that all of us have a lot to share here, and so I'll keep my comments brief. And
We've got plenty of time.
well, I think that one of the opportunities here, right? I won't call it a challenge, but obviously with this kind of new technology, as we certainly set our sights on some of these emerging competencies that are coming forward with these new technologies like robotics, the reality is that a lot of the curriculum is evolving as well, and so that's both the competency and the vehicles that we have in our offering to deliver the competency we as an industry. And so I thought I'd maybe start the response to this really important question, just sort of elevating it to the importance of competency-based training and development programs that are aligned with the performance requirements of those small, medium-sized businesses that you described. And really trying to head off any thoughts of shortcutting the process, which we've seen in industry, we all have, where training managers or HR managers might race right to an instruction manual or to perhaps some outdated materials, when the question really needs to be to what output and to what performance level do we want our workforce to perform, and how through a competency-based model can we work our way down into a curriculum plan and ultimately a content strategy. VR technologies offer a lot of ROI and a lot of return there. You mentioned something interesting before I hand it over to the panel for some further input, is that, with tooling USME, where those same HR managers that you mentioned in your the small, medium-sized businesses, not only are they challenged with upskilling their incumbent workforce with these competency-based training and development programs, but they're also desperately in many ways. These are folks that want to be looking for the evidence of kind of competency approach in those employers as part of their interest in even staying past the first day or the first week. It's so important to show these folks that you, the employer, have that plan to onboard them without too much anxiety, right? And that's where VR can certainly help with the simulated environments, but really show them that longer view of the care and feeding that you as an enterprise, as an employer, want to have for their skills. And so I'll hand it over to the panel, but a really, really great question. Thank you for asking it.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to add to that, Dan. I think, when we look at AR, VR, I think one of the really big advantages that it has is a lot of times, the need for hardware, the need for equipment right now in training, for a small to medium size or even an educational institute to bring in to teach their students, a lot of times that's lagging that of what's really happening in industry. And I think VR, AR can bridge that gap. I think we can get the training to align with what's happening in industry a lot quicker. So we're not lagging behind what a student needs to know to be successful when stepping into that space.
And quickly, one more thought here is just to share that one of the most interesting, or a couple of the most interesting projects I'm working on right now is using AR and VR as a recruitment tool within education and workforce development. So not just using it to learn, but using it to engage with persistent digital spaces and drawing prospective students or workers in. So more on that I can share down the road, but this is really a cross section, not just using AR to enhance existing learning, but methods and techniques.
Great. Can any of you talk a bit about what you see as the biggest advantages? And actually, Jim, this might be a good point for you to expand on what you had started mentioning earlier, the last question. How can we make the best use of AR, VR in training and assessment? And what disadvantages or challenges do you see in the adoption of AR, VR in that manner?
Right. Well, I don't know about disadvantages or advantages. I look at this and depending, the use case is everything, right? And Raj did a great job of highlighting, right? I agree. I think overall VR might be, have an edge. I have hands, I can move around a lot easier. But at the end of the day, budgets come into play, and the fact that everybody, just about everybody, can access a 3D engagement, an AR engagement from a phone. It just goes a long way in being able to reach, right now, very quickly, remote workforce, remote learners, underserved, from a smartphone. So I'll leave it at that. Let others add on to that, but that's I think that's the kernel at the beginning of this, right? Is that access, right? Even though money plays a big role in prohibiting folks, to build some things, but if we can push out interactive AR environments, we can get there reach a lot of people very quickly through the device they already have in their pocket.
Yeah, great point.
Can I add to that, Marilyn?
Sure.
So just to make sure I got the question. So you asked about the advantages of VR, AR in training and assessment compared to traditional, whether it's e-learning or on the job with an expert and so on, right? And then
are there disadvantages associated with it or challenges?
Yeah, challenges. So there are tremendous advantages. That's why, in so many cases where we have worked with customers, there's a clear ROI, and the time to value is very short. Right. So in the cases where we have worked with manufacturers, they have deployed it, scaled it up to additional facilities. And that's definitely going to accelerate, in my view, going forward. The disadvantages and the challenges across the board are that you have a lot of complexity associated with the new technology. In a lot of companies, it may be hard to find somebody who is very excited about trying something new, and just the struggles that come along with learning a new technology. There's also content gap, right? So whereas in e-learning, which has been around for decades, you can find the content for a lot of different topics, it's harder to find content on VR, AR because it's such a new field. So for a larger company, it may not be a huge problem to actually have programmers, Unity programmers or artists and stuff, or who can just create bespoke content for their needs. But that's a huge problem for a smaller company. They really struggle to allocate enough resources when their numbers of people trained are much smaller. So content is a big problem. And one thing that we have done over the last 5 years, building on our background in software, is that we recognized early on that all the potential of VR, AR is people are going to struggle to unlock that potential if if the content barrier is too high. So we invested a lot in building a no-code platform called Hyperskill. So content creation can become 10 to 100 times faster than if you had to hire programmers and 3D artists, all of those people inside your company. So now with Hyperskill and other tools like it, you can drag and drop and create content. You can publish it across platform, and you can get data back. Just like you get data in LMS system, you can get all the data back, even much richer data, which is so important for proficiency assessment and credentialing, right? So I just want to highlight that content is one of the challenges, and there are a lot of companies that are working at the content layer of the stack, if you will. But then also the headset companies and other AR/VR companies, they're all working very hard to basically address these challenges, because they know that adoption critically depends on making it easy.
All right, well, thank you. We're doing pretty well on time, I believe. So I think before we take a look at what's in the chat, I would like to ask one more question and get your thoughts on what kind of improvements to AR/VR based training and assessments do you see becoming commonplace in the near term? For example, do you see greater implementation of environmental sounds, and basically just what kind of technological advances do you see on the horizon, both near term and maybe a little further term?
I can start. So there's in my mind, there's a lot of technical advances that we can expect over the next 10 years. The headsets are going to get much more powerful in terms of resolution, field of view, battery life, lower weight, obviously lower cost. Haptics is an area that I'm very excited about and has huge implications for skills, right? Where the system can not only sense your hand motion, but also give feedback so that you can learn some skills faster. Sounds, spatial sounds, there's a lot of technologies already in place today. It just has to get in, be manifested in the content that's being produced. So no-code tools can go help a lot there by making it easier to put different kinds of sounds and layer them and make them spatial. And then last but not least, AI. So the amount of data that a VR or AR headset can collect from a participant is way bigger than what you can collect on a tablet, right? Where you're just clicking. But in AR/VR, you're looking around, you have gaze. So there's a lot more data that can be collected. And with machine learning and AI techniques, it's possible to analyze that data and build a much richer profile or picture of what does this user understand, what are they having difficulty with, and then use that to give them a score or give them feedback to really help them along in the skill building process. So that's one huge potential application of AI. And the other application is in just content creation. All of these standard operating procedures across manufacturing and other fields, they all have to get virtualized and digitized into an immersive new form factor. And AI has a role to play in terms of making that much faster, like 10 or 100 times faster than traditional methods, but also improving the final quality of that content. So these are some of the technologies that our team is looking forward to.
Yeah, that's really nicely put, Raj, and thank you. Thank you for that. If I could we're very excited at Tooling U SME as these technologies are really focused as instructional tools, right? And so if you kind of back to juxtaposing AR versus VR, both technologies can provide so much value and speed to what Raj and others have been saying on this call, to that transfer of knowledge, kind of whether it's a real world simulation or an actual plant that the employee is working on, or just sort of in more of a modern textbook example of transferring a lot of the requisite skills and knowledge and abilities as somebody is on their journey towards full competency on a robotic system. And when you look at the role of AI, as Raj nicely outlined, what we can compress and really streamline in the process is being able to give each individual learner through the feedback on AI, through by tagging metadata, by looking at what someone is doing in these simulated environments with the glasses, etc. This system will be able to prescribe in real time exactly what that individual learner may or may not need. And when you think about, sort of traditional assessment processes, whether it's a written exam or an oral exam or even a hands-on exam, imagine your 3D world being able to morph in real time based on what it is able to measure about that which you're picking up, that what you're able to demonstrate by way of competency or knowledge, and that where you're lacking. And so that's extremely exciting for those of us in the education space where, for 50 years now, going back to some of the research, for those of us, I don't want to date myself, but the PLAN programs and the Franklin programs and some of the other original programs around, what are those best strategies to prioritize and align learning based on actual assessed needs. AI really is an amazing opportunity for us to do this instantly in real time and tie the curriculum to it. So really, really excited about that.
And one last thought on this is, and it was mentioned before, of the growth of using AI in our industry, and Raj mentioned even in development of assets. And I think that's important because, frankly, the world's being turned into 3D models right now in environments and assets. There's such a huge demand for it that AI, right, has been implemented to achieve those goals. And that's it's really incredible how many models are being made, generic models are being made, and assets are being made. But AI is helping that process and moving it to an automated level. We're not quite there yet at all levels of photorealistic, but again, the 3D model and AR are important parts of this equation.
All right. Well, thank you. I think I'm going to check and see if we've got any questions that have come up in the chat.
Yes, we do. We have several. Why don't we start off with, I guess, like we've had, first of all, some technical difficulties with some of the videos of the presenters, so I apologize for that. But do we have any type of demos of the technologies that we've been talking about today that maybe you all could make available in the chat? I think some people are wondering if there's anything that they can see or where they can go to see some of these technologies.
Yes, I shared a video showing the ARM project, the robotic technician project, Annette.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Raj.
Yeah, the same thing with the Tooling SME VR labs. You can go to either sme.org or toolingu.com, and you can jump right in and have a look at the programs that we're rolling out. But I think we have it in chat as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
The next question is asking if any of the panelists have seen the end result where participants have successfully integrated into productive employment after training through VR and or AR platforms. Has anyone seen that actually work in live time?
Yes, Annette. So I also shared a case study link in response to that question.
Oh,
I think
fantastic.
it's a really good question. I can elaborate on that if you like, but the case study has a video attached to it. It's a real customer.
Okay. Okay. Did you want to maybe talk about some highlights about that
Sure.
experience?
So yes, absolutely. So this was in 2019. So we worked with a company in South Carolina where they had the problem that they had these open roles that they had to fill in order to keep up with their production demand. It's a manufacturing company, and they were bringing people in, taking them through about a 10-week training program and putting them on the production line. And within a few days, the people were leaving. And so the company was basically going right back to the beginning and losing a lot of money as this churn was happening. And so I went there and visited the factory and got an experience of, what's the traditional training program like, what's the work environment like. And what we recommended to them and ended up building for them is a virtual reality based training. So this training ended up matching the reality to a very, very high degree, which meant that the skills that people learned inside VR, they were able to transfer to the job without any significant problems. And that was number one. And number two was that learning inside VR was vastly superior to learning in the classroom, as well as learning on the production line. So why is that in this case? Is because the production line is a very noisy environment. You have to have your headphones and there's a lot of moving machinery. It's very stressful. So if you can imagine that trying to learn a skill in that environment, nobody would prefer that, right? So shifting to VR solved that problem. And then it's better than traditional because clearly in traditional you're listening to lectures, watching videos, whereas here you are actually doing this skill. You're getting feedback at such a high rate, so you're able to learn a lot better, right? So we saw it's very popular now. It's very popular in that plant. Within a few months, the system was built, piloted, they were delighted, they rolled it out into production. And then they even referred us to another plant where we have developed a different situation because there's a different production process there, but it's spreading inside of that company. Now, obviously, COVID put a big damper on that growth, but regardless, it's going on.
Okay, thanks for that, Raj. Another question, this person had mentioned that they have not been successful in finding many AR applications to use in education in the technical manufacturing area, such as CNC machining, and whether or not you see the number of AR applications growing in this area.
I certainly see the number growing. And it is, maybe the question is if there's not a lot of, AR off the shelf, so to speak, ready-made applications that are available. And that's certainly true. We tend to be finding two halves, I guess two sides, developing programs either specifically for a group, right? So it's going to be there just for their company. But then we have others where it's more of an industry program. So going back to before, where they have existing programs, whether it be video-based e-learning, and they're enhancing them. And there we're seeing exponential growth, right? Where they're adding them. And I think it's because they're taking the effort to make all the pieces, parts available, industry specific. So, if that's the question, or application, and there's plenty of applications, literal applications to build on or to deliver on in AR.
So if I can add to Jim's point, what we have learned after building so many different AR/VR applications is that if you compare it to a web application, it is a much more challenging task because you have 3D models to work with, you have new devices to work with, lots of things are changing. And at the same time, you still have to have pretty much all of the things that you needed in a web application. You got to have all of them here as well, because you have to log in, you have to collect data, you have to have a database. So it ends up being a very, very heavy task. And so we saw that, and we took inspiration from the web world. There have been so many applications in the web world that enable no-code creation of applications, and we thought, it's guaranteed that people will want that kind of application for AR/VR, and so That's what Hyperskill aims to do, and I request anyone to get in touch. I've given my contact information, as well as our website has a lot of information. So what we are trying to do is enable a lot more people to be able to drag and drop and create their experiences, which in some cases you can consider them to be apps.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
there's a lot out there that we see. We get a lot of calls for people that stuck their toe in the water, so to speak, the smaller or certainly the mid-size rather, and even the larger, where they went at it. They made an attempt to do it. They didn't have Raj's platform to make it easier, and so they get stuck. And that's really the bottom line. They got stuck. And so we end up more and more, we'll see engagements for people that want us to finish a project or help us work together to move forward.
Okay, thanks for that, Jim. Another question, VR, AR teaching tools are great, but content is key. How does a company go about developing the content? I know, Raj, you could
Yeah.
probably address that question.
Yeah, exactly. This is the problem that we set out to solve with Hyperskill. Content is always the king, right? Like, you look at, I think about music industry, I listen to music, and there's an example for content. How long has it been since all these technologies existed? But look, the content creator is still the king. And there's no reason to expect anything different in any field of content, including training, right? So we want to put the platform out there. We are at the service of the people who have the ideas for how to light up brains and how to excite people about careers. We know that we just built like a musical instrument, but if there's no musician out there who's passionate, this instrument is useless. So to everyone here, please get in touch. Don't hesitate, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that we can help you capture your idea in all of its potential and get it out there to your audience.
That's really, really nicely put, Raj, and I'll cite something in this. It's a really important question around alignment of content. And what we've heard from the panel is one of the real opportunities here is that with this technology, certainly in the AR and VR simulation of an individual's workspace, you really have that opportunity through some of the tools that you're hearing from the panel to really capture that specific factory floor and build curriculum and measure competency towards, say, specific environments. One of the pieces, just having the fabulous ARM group here on this call, will talk about the great work that your organization is doing, Mary Ellen, and others to bring forward industry credentials and pathways whereby kind of serving as that subject matter expert and bringing together a lot of the important technologies, both to the employers and to the education communities. We can validate together, right? What are those certifications, credentials, and ultimately training programs that have already, I guess, benefited from that alignment and that peer review, if you will, and authentication from industry. And so if the question is coming from, say, the educator, say, how can industry standards? I think you'll find a lot of modern industry input on this curriculum. And in the case of Tooling SME, we're proud to align those 500 e-learning classes and services to many of the credentials, and many of them being ARM members. And so I think that it's back to, I guess, content is king, which I entirely agree with, Raj. What we have at our disposal now are AR and VR technologies to support both those pathways, as well as actually true simulation of real world environments. And so these are some of the new ways that you're finding that alignment.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, one final question. Actually, this is directed towards Raj about the Hyperskill and whether or not it allows you to use your captured 3D images for the manufacturing space. It appears to be limited to a repository that the software uses.
No, actually, it's not a limitation. We do support scans and 3D captures, and I've provided my email ID to Stephen to discuss this further. The repository is there not as a substitute, but as an aid. So it has all these things that people can just drag and drop and get to their goal faster.
Okay, great, fantastic. Okay, so we're going to wrap up here. If you want to talk further to the panelists, we have here all of the the email addresses for the panelists. And if you have any questions for ARM, please feel free to just log on to our membership at arminstitute.org, and they will direct your question to the appropriate person. Okay, everyone will also obviously get a copy of this webinar, so it will be a resource for you. Coming up, following this webinar will be another member webinar from John Zappa, our Senior Product Manager here at ARM, on lessons from Germany's apprenticeship program. He just came back from a trip over in Germany. So we'll do a little bit of a highlight on what he learned there. So with that, we're going to end our webinar. Thank you so much for attending our first webinar of 2023. Thank you to Corey, to Raj, to Jim, and to Dan for agreeing to participate on the panel discussion. And feel free to reach out to us if you have any further questions. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Annette, Mary Ellen. Thank you, panelists.